My name is Dina Bida. I'm a risk manager and an individual financial advisor. I work with Prudential Assurance as an agency manager, and I really care deeply and I'm passionate about people and families in our communities. My passion stems from the desire to protect families through financial literacy and by the use of financial instruments. And my commitment towards that is building a robust relationships with my existing customers. And of course, I take a very consultative approach when it comes to working with them to create the best suited financial solutions to suit their needs.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Dean. Dean, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Susan. Basically, what I do is I give people peace of mind through helping them assess risk management. When you asked about the $1 Million Roundtable, the MDRT was an organization that started in 1962, and Uganda had never represented till 2019. The $1 Million Roundtable is an organization of financial advisors that started in the United States, that's in the UK and the greater part of Asia. And I was the first representative in 2019 to represent Uganda on that $1 Million Roundtable. Basically, what does it mean? It means I was able to bring substantial individual business, but not group business. When I mean individual business, I'm talking about one-on-one, scaling business brick by brick. So I'm proud to say that I'm an entrepreneur in that sense. And yes, I've been the $1 Million Roundtable representative 2019 and 2020 with a portfolio of, as of last week, I had a portfolio of 317 clients, and I'm talking about individual clients. And with that said, as I stated earlier, I do not want to take so much of your time. I will just delve right into the subject matter being financial literacy. And you must be wondering, what does financial literacy have to do with the topic at hand? Financial literacy it's the ultimate goal, ideally. We're all looking for financial independence. We want to get to a point, most of us have financial goals, both short, medium, and long term. With that said, I would just like to share some of my slides and just get right into it. As I said, why are we talking about financial literacy in retrospect to a will? Basically, financial literacy is one of the contents that are entailed in that will or estate planning. So what I'm here to talk about is how do we build on those financial blocks. We talked about financial literacy being one of the trilogies or one of the elements when it comes to estate planning. Why financial literacy is important? Because on the call we have so many entrepreneurs. Personally, I've been an entrepreneur and I have failed several times. And I believe failure is actually one of the stepping stones to success. And you must understand that being an entrepreneur is a very hard thing. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of losses. It needs a character who is very tenacious, who has the grit and is able to acknowledge that indeed they're making the mistakes and able to see how best they can equip themselves to be better. Basically, financial literacy is a possession of certain skills and knowledge that enable you to make an informed and effective decision with the available financial resources. With that said, we need to understand what are these little cores of financial literacy. Of course, you cannot save or rather invest what you do not earn. And earning comes from different streams, i.e. your job, which is your job. It could be consultancy, it could be through trade, or whatever it is, through even blogging. Right now, as you can see, the dynamics in the market has changed, and we do not have the old school, or rather what the conservative way of making money. Things are changing. There's a lot going on in the tech space when it comes to information and artificial intelligence. So there's a lot going on, and it's time that we realize that things are changing. It's a global village, and there is a need for us to adapt. So you need to understand the earning perspective, the saving perspective, the investing perspective, spending, borrowing, and protecting. Most of us, actually, I've not even put the taxation element, but taxation plays a very big role when it comes to estate planning. it starts from a behavioral perspective, because we might have economists, you might be an entrepreneur, you might know the numbers, but if you do not understand, if you don't have that behavioral point, that perspective, then definitely you will not be able to meet your goal, your future financial goals. You need to understand and identify your basic necessities and how you should save and spend. There's always, if you look at our population, which is a young one, the highest population being between the 25-year-old to the 42-year-olds, you realize most of us spend a lot, not only on needs, but on wants. Make sure that it's actually what they call the 50-30-20 rule. You need to make sure that your wants do not surpass your needs. And you have to make sure that you mitigate it in a way that your needs and your wants do not also overly surpass by 50% what you put aside for your savings or for your investment. But on the other hand, you would be a fool to only save your money without investing. Automate your savings whenever you receive your salary or whatever it is in your business. There is always been a culture here, or rather, it's an impulsive thing. I have it at the same time. You know, some of us are speaking from this point of view, but do not get it wrong. We're not yet millionaires. We're still making the mistakes. But the bottom line is you need to acknowledge what are those financial hindrances, or what are those things that are not enabling you get to your financial goals. And savings and the way we utilize what we get at the end of our business will definitely is a factor to reckon when you're growing your business. It's very cyclical. You realize you get your salary on the 25th, and by the next month on the 7th, you have depleted everything. Why is that? You need to automate as soon as your money comes through, before you spend it. The Asians tend to apportion about 40% of what they receive towards the investment and savings. Whilst for some of us in our culture, there is always that need to sometimes we even surpass what we have received. You find that you earn 1 million shillings, and by the end of the cycle, you have borrowed 1.5, and you're always playing catch up. So it's important that you automate your savings. You need to monitor your spending habits and, of course, cut down on the unnecessary luxuries. As I spoke prior in terms of identifying your basic needs, do not spend a lot. There's certain things that are a necessity, i.e. your rent, your food, your shelter, your insurance, and maybe your investment club and your circle and all that. But sometimes we get so impulsive. There's a culture of that impulsiveness whereby we tend to spend on ostentatious goods that do not actually create value, and they deplete into our finances. And I know sometimes you're thinking, oh, YOLO, you got to live. We need a life, we need a balance. Yes, that's ultimately the goal. We need to have a balance, but then you need to realize that there is what they call short-term pain for long-term gain. And you need to start on your saving goals. You need to have a deep understanding of the financial processes, i.e., you need to determine what is your current situation. If you do not know where you're at, if you do not know where you have come from, you do not know where you're going. You cannot manage your finances in an ad hoc kind of manner. So you need to understand, determine what your financial situation is. You need to develop financial goals. Identify what the course of action in terms of those financial goals and the different alternatives. Evaluate the different alternatives. When I talk about alternatives, there are very many different alternatives. In the financial space, we have, for example, treasury bills. We have equities and stocks. We have treasury bills. We have unit trust. We have government bonds. We have the share market, which is the equities market. It's important that you have an understanding of your current financial situation, because if you do not know where you're going, or you do not know where you've come from, you'll definitely have setbacks financially. The other thing is you need to develop financial goals. When you talk about the financial goals, we have what we call the short, the medium, and the long term. And you need also identify alternative course of action, meaning now that you know the different alternatives, the different financial instruments, what is your course of action? then you need to evaluate them, of course, because you cannot put all your eggs in one basket. It's necessary that you have a 360 portfolio. You have a deeper understanding of exactly what it is that you want to get into. If you realize a lot of get rich schemes are coming up, and we tend to just go with the flow without having a deeper understanding of the risks that are involved. So I always tell people, it might seem old school, it might seem archaic. It's always good to have an understanding of that financial instrument that you're going to partake, because if you don't have an in-depth about what it is that you're going to invest in, you're bound to make losses. You also need to create, of course, and implement a financial action plan. With that said, what do I mean? We tend to say we're going to do this year. I have a goal. I'm going to put money aside. I want to buy maybe a 25 decimal plot on Entebbe Road or Gayaza Road. It's about 30 million shillings. What do I need? How much do I need to put aside a month if I'm to save for a year or 2 years? So we need to action those plans, because we end up being static in the sense that we start to procrastinate, because a lot tends to go on in the interim period between the time that we hope to meet our financial goals. The other one is you need to reevaluate, of course, reevaluate and revise that plan. You see, after you have set these things aside, are you reevaluating? Are you close to your financial goal? So it's important that you do that. So one of the things most of us are talking about a will, and people must be wondering, what is the gist of an insurance policy in all this? An insurance policy is actually a will, and you cannot contest against an insurance policy because it is legally stated and well stated in your policy document what you're worth, what your guaranteed worth is, or your risk worth, who are your next of kin, and who is your beneficiary, and you can always change that. So with that said, I would just like to take you through what the different instruments, as I said, and I'll talk about it as we keep going along. But what is life insurance? What is insurance generally? People, if you look at the insurance market in Uganda, you realize our penetration level, this is including both life and general business. When I mean life, I mean the education plans, I mean the retirement plans, the annuities. And then we have what we call the general insurance, which is your comprehensive, which is your business, which is freight and logistics. You realize that insurance, most people do not have a deeper understanding because, of course, it's pretty new. Also, the people who have spoken about it have not been very clear about the terms and conditions. You also need, some people do not have an understanding of exactly why and the need. So what life insurance actually does, what it is basically transferring risk from one party to another party. And the one who is on the receiving end pays a certain premium in order to be covered. Basically, if you're looking for a safety net, if you want a fallback position, let me give you an example of the scenario at this moment. The black swan is into play. The pandemic has come through. Everyone has been affected, from small businesses to even blue chip companies. So what does that tell you? It tells you that things are happening. We know people close to us in our families and our networks who are actually passing on, and their stream of income was their job. And these are young families who have left kids who are about 5 years old to 10 years old. So what happens when the breadwinner is gone? Has he compromised his family? What becomes of the family? Are they able to sustain their lifestyle and the welfare that they had prior his death or prior the loss? So insurance is the ability to transfer risk from one entity that is able to another entity that may be exposed. Now, with that said, what are the reasons? Why are the reasons that people buy insurance in the first place? Of course, insurance will help you to hedge against the possibility of a lost income. A lost income being, for example, you've been saving for you started your work, maybe you started active formal employment when you're about 28. You hope to possibly say, you know what, I want to retire in the next 10 years. That makes a hybrid retiree. How much do you need to put aside with the exemption of what you have at your NSSF? So the journey begins there. So if you've been saving for quite some time, you realize even if you had a job loss, you still have something that can hedge against your lost income. Those who have children, I see very many mompreneurs here who are doing business. I want to ask a question to you. What is your most important asset? Some of you will say my property. Some of you will say your businesses. But the truth be told, the most important asset is you, because without you, you cannot steer that building. I mean, you cannot steer that business. It's very important that you protect yourself so that in case, Lord forbid, you're gone, your family is not exposed. The money that is paid out is able to continue with the business. In case you had a loan, for example, you took a mortgage, what happens? Usually, of course, if you've taken a mortgage, if you not pay and you passed on or you cannot pay off, it's going to be disposed. So that means you have exposed your family. But when you have these financial instruments, it helps you. It's more like a shock absorber. It helps you to mitigate the risk. So irrespective of the fact whether you're there or you're not, your family is not compromised. Your children will still have an education. I also talked about debt protection, because sometimes people say debt, you see, taking loans is a bad thing. But for as long as you know that you can service that loan, you know, there's what they call OPM, other people's money. We use other people's money to make money. That's why the banks are there. But do not go and you earn a salary of 1 million shillings. You decide to go and take a loan of 200 million, and then think about it. How are you going to repay that loan? There is the interest element. How are you going to service that loan? So it's important that you have a deep understanding and you do what we call you introspect into your finances and see exactly what are the things that I need to do. Can I actually take on this loan? Is it feasible? Do I have income streams that are going to suffice and pay for the loan? The other thing is, of course, living expenses. There comes a time that we might lose this job and we do not have income streams. Is there something that we put aside as an emergency fund to take us through our living expenses? We have also physically or dependent parents, or even our own kids, those who have special needs. What happens if you've not put an emergency fund? You've exposed yourself. Childcare. Also inheritance. That's why we're talking about a will. An insurance policy is actually more about inheritance. It's about estate planning. It's about leaving something for the people you love most. But irrespective of the fact that you do not have people, it's important that you put something aside for yourself. Who needs it? Basically, there's what we call the 28,000 rule. The 28,000 rule was an approximate of exactly how many days we live on earth. 28,000 days is the time at which people hope to live for. That is a statistic number research was done on that. And you find that 28,000 is about 76.4 years. But when we put it closer, we say 80 years. So what happens? We have what we call the quadrant. The quadrant is divided into 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Between 0 and 20, what is happening in your lives? Life is great. Life is fantastic. We're financially dependent on our parents. We do not have any cost implications or expenses. We're in school, we're playing around, we're enjoying life. Between the 20 and the 40, what's happening? You find that most of us either started our first job, you might have gotten your first mortgage. Some of us have gotten kids. Others have gotten their first house. Others have kids. Others are married. Others are divorced. Between the 40 and the 60, what is going on here? You realize that people are starting to slow down. There's the age factor. You know, age is a very important factor when it comes to financial planning and in insurance. The older you are, the higher the risk you are. So that's why it's always important to start doing these financial instruments or these financial securities when you still have a disposable income and when you still have age on your side. Between 40 and 60, you have your second house, possibly. Maybe you've decided to partake in businesses, i.e. you're doing rentals. You may get a second car or a third car. You've gone into consultancy. Your kids are going to school and actually finishing their first stage of schooling. Now, between 60 and 80, what's happening here? We all want to retire, but the thing is, these days it's not even dependent on the age. It is at how much you want to retire at. But if we're to look at the principle, which has been between 60 to 80, most of us, there is a fear of a thing called no income, because here you're unable to work because of the age factor. There is the health factor. You're not as healthy. You're not as proactive as possible. So do you realize, ideally, this entire between 60 and 80 and 0 and 20 of our life is already gone. So we are left between the 20 to the 60 quadrant to make things work out. What do I mean? I mean, if let's say you're 30 or you're 40, you have less than 20 years to make good. What do I mean? The timing for you to start making those financial steps, those long-term goals or mid to long-term goals in order to sustain you when you get to a point of retirement. If you look at 0 to 20 and 60 to 20, it's very synonymous. There is no income. So we are saying, what are the things that we need to do to make sure that by the time we get here, we retire comfortably? So with that said, ideally we started with 28,000 days. By just the 0 to 20 and the 60 to 80, we have been cut short by 14,000 days, which makes it 40 years. So you need to figure out, what are you going to do between now and 60 to make it work? But also, you need to understand that there are 4 fears that will come up. And those are universal fears. What if you cannot work till 60? What can stop you from working? Of course, critical illness, permanent disability. What if you do not reach 60? What do I mean you do not reach 60? There is death. We have so many people passing on at 30, at 40. What happens? Do you have a life insurance policy? Do you have a fallback position? Do you have a treasury bond that you have informed your family about, that is through your commercial bank? Do you have a unit trust? Are you involved in a circle or in an investment club? Do they know your assets? Have you been able to share this information with your estate manager or your administrator? If that's so, do you have a will? Have you shared that with your lawyer? So how much is enough to retire? These days, gone are the days when we knew you retire at 60 or 65. These days we have what's called the hybrid retirees. The hybrid retirees are people who have said to themselves, I am going to grease on, I am going to work so hard, and I want to retire at 40 or 45. But the thing is, how much do you want to retire? Is it $1 million? Is it 500,000 US dollars? Is it 100 million? Is it 200 million? What is sufficient enough for you to retire comfortably? Now, the other fear is, how can I ensure that my kids start with the right foundation? We are talking about education. With insurance, you're able to have education policies. You're able to have retirement policies. With that said,